Hello and welcome. My name is David Gallup. I am President and General Counsel of World Service Authority. Today I am here with Nicos Hadjicostis, who's the author of a new book called Destination Earth, a new philosophy of travel by a world traveler. And World Service Authority is an organization that focuses on the right to identification and the right to freedom of travel. So we thought it would be wonderful to speak with Nicos today to learn more about his travels. He spent 6 years traveling around the world, and then he wrote this book about it, and even mentions the founder of the organization in his book. So welcome, Nicos. Thank you for spending time with us today to talk about yourself, to talk about the book. So first, if you could, spend a few minutes telling us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to write this book, Destination Earth.
Thank you for inviting me, David. It's a great honor for me. Because I admire the work of Gary Davis, and this is my first interview after the publication of my book, and that's great to be talking to you. You know.
Thank you.
How I decided to travel around the world. That's your first question.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, that the sort of the background that led you to decide that you want, led you to decide that you wanted to travel.
I had led a very intense life. I was in the media in my country, Cyprus. That's where I was born, and I worked in the media. And I decided that around the age of 35 that I had had enough, and I decided that I wanted something else in my life. I wanted to, let's say, search for the meaning of life. I retreated for 4 or 5 years in the countryside, reading books and meditating on the meaning of life. And then I decided to travel. I started by traveling around the United States. And then I liked it so much that I said, why not go the whole way and see the whole world? And I decided to travel around the world. My original plan was to do it in, let's say, 2 years, but then it lasted for 6.5 because the world was much bigger than I had originally thought.
I see.
So that's how it all started. It was a kind of a search for the meaning of life, a search for something else. And I ended up traveling around the world without ever having planned it from the beginning.
I see. Had you thought about writing a book during your travels, or was it after your travels that this idea of writing your book?
It was after my travels. During my travels, I wrote my ideas in my diary of ideas, as I call them. And after the end of my journey, a couple of years later, I decided that there was enough material there to write a book, actually more than one book. And this book of mine is actually 2 books, because the second part is practical and the first part is theoretical. So yeah, it kind of the book found itself through me after the journey, if I could put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading your book because it was useful to me as a person who does travel. I don't do long-term travel like you have done. It's usually short. The longest I might travel at any one time, maybe two weeks or something, which could still be a good amount of time to be in one place if you do it for that long. Mm-hmm. And so I was interested how you talked about maybe the philosophy of travel and what travel means, but you also gave really practical and useful explanations to people about what they can do in planning their own travels. Did that come to you also as you were writing the book?
No, it came as I was traveling. I was making observations and I took note of all these things. And at the end of the journey, I realized that I had enough material there to also give some advice to those who are interested in traveling long term.
Sure. Okay. That's great. Well, do you think, what's the difference between, say, a short-term travel and what a person would get out of that versus long-term?
The simple answer is 3 weeks. Over 3 weeks is a long-term travel. Less than 3 weeks is a short-term travel. That's a kind of easy way to separate it. But the idea is that when you travel for many weeks or many months, you come to delve deeper into the foreign cultures and societies. You read books, you move in the countryside, because if you travel for a week, you will go to the capital of the country and then you stay there for 3 or 4 days. Maybe you travel around the to sites near the main city, you will never really see the culture. But when you travel for 3-4 weeks, you will maybe rent a car, you will get a train, maybe a taxi, and you go out in the countryside and you start feeling what it means to live in that country. So it's a more deep experience. And then when you go into 3 months and 4 months, then the journey becomes very transformative. So there's a transformative element in a long-term travel that you don't have in a short-term travel. The short-term travel is not very different from watching a travel program on TV. I write about that in my book, actually. So if you go for a week and you see 5 cities and so on, not big difference from watching something on TV. You will see everything so fast. It's like various images passing by without you really relating to the heart and soul of a country.
I see. Yeah. So it makes sense that if we can spend more time with people in their community, almost living with them, we can gain more understanding, a deeper understanding. That's
the most important thing, actually, of long-term travel. It has nothing to do with being more time in the countryside and, let's say, exploring a mountain, although this is important, because when you stay in the Amazon for a week, it's a completely different experience than when you get a half-day tour with 50 other people on a boat and someone talks to you about the Amazon. It's different staying in the Amazon and overnight and listening to the sounds and the weird, strange sounds of animals, and it's completely different experience.
Sure. Well, so tell us a little bit about the most important lessons that you gained from your long-term travel.
Many lessons. I could speak for 3 hours, but I kind of summarized a few things that in my book that relate to the world as a whole and to societies. And maybe I could go briefly over these points. The one is that the world is huge. It's much bigger than any of you imagine, because imagining how the world is different from actually going through the world and seeing how huge it is, And this is our home, as I call the world in my book, is very big. And it's good for all those who are listening to us now to start exploring it while they still have time, and while they are still young and have energy, and while it is still easy to travel, because sometimes there are many problems in traveling. Now it's actually a good period, not many visas and not many restrictions, and these things change. So the first thing is that the world is providing everything you need during your travels is being met. All your needs are being met. That's the other important thing. So there is nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. And this brings us to the third point, that the world is safe. Many travel books begin with dangers and annoyances in the first chapter, and people think, oh, wow, there are dangers here. Even France and even Switzerland, the guidebooks of these countries have this chapter, but no country is dangerous. No country is dangerous. Nothing happened to me. You can ask me later on about this. And the world is friendly and hospitable. Most people are friendly and hospitable. They are not very different from your neighbors, from your neighborhood. And this is the feeling you get after probably a few years of travel, that the world is a hospitable place and a friendly place, full of open-hearted people, always ready to invite you to their wedding, to their home, to be of help to you, and so on. And this brings us again to the next important, let's say, realization of a world traveler, that we are all human beings. We belong to one big brotherhood, as your organization promotes, and we are all global citizens by right of birth. And this is the other important thing. And I could sum it up by saying that the world is infinite, in the sense that you will always find more things to learn and more things to explore in the world. So the world is not finite, although it's a globe and it's finite, because we have a minimum amount of time on this earth, and because we only have 2 eyes, with respect to us, it's an infinite world. We are little ants walking about in an infinite world, and there are always many things to discover. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate how you explain not only your travel, but travel in general. It really makes it me, and I'm sure others, feel enthusiastic about wanting to see the world, through their eyes. As you were talking, a question came to mind about linguistically. I mean, maybe you speak several languages, but I know you were in places where you did not speak the language. What did you do for communication so that you could successfully fulfill your basic human needs, but also move beyond those needs?
Yes, in the places where I didn't speak the language, I had the most memorable and the most deep experiences, because I realized that, again, we come back to the common humanity. Our common humanity, which is the substratum of that lies at the heart of our human communication, is always there, irrespective of whether we speak the language or not. So in China, for example, where I used my various pantomime and my Greek facial expressions and so on, it was so interesting to get to understand complicated ideas through non-verbal communication, and to see the love of people and the helpfulness of people who did not speak any word of English. This was amazing. And it was never a problem. It was never a problem. The fact verbal communication at the end of the day is not as important as what most people think.
Okay, that's good. That's really reassuring. I'm glad to hear that. It shows that there's this common humanity, that even if we can't verbalize our feelings, our thoughts, that we can still get those feelings and thoughts across to.
You see that in movies, actually. In movies, the best love scenes are those when nobody talks. It's just these silences in this space, that many things are revealed to you. Many magnificent things, actually.
Oh, I love that. Well, so tell us, this leads me to the question of how you changed during your travels personally, as well as maybe how your being in certain places changed the people around you. So it's a sort of a two-part question.
Okay. Yes. First of all, as I say in the first chapter of my book, again, we come to my book because all these ideas are there. The long-term travel is the ultimate university, because it brings together theory and practice. So you learn all your life a million things, and then you have to practice them in your everyday life. How to control your anger, how to be friendly with people, how to be polite, how other people are polite to you, and so on. So you practice all these millions of things that were in some space there. You read history, you read about the Inca, the Maya, and so on, but then you visit the ruins of these cultures and you read about them, and you have to read about them in order to appreciate what you see. So first of all, it's the ultimate university. It's like you do 3 or 4 PhDs at the same time. So in this sense, I've learned many things that were theoretical and practical. That's the first thing. And the second thing is this bringing together of theory and practice. The fact that every day of your life you had to practice all the things you've learned up to that moment. So I was in China in total 6 months, 6 months in total. So after the 4 months, I moved in this country with an ease that it's difficult to describe. I felt like a Chinese. So I had to practice all these things that I had learned during the first 4 months, the last 2 months. And the last 2 months brought my understanding of the culture to a different level, because I moved in this culture as a Chinese, and I communicated at a much deeper level. So, and these things transform you. These things transform you, and that's why the journey is I say that the journey is twofold. It's the outer journey and the inner journey. And while you move in the outer world, you are transformed inside also. And that's why at the end of the day, a long-term journey, the difference actually between a long-term journey and a short-term journey that you asked me earlier is probably this, that in a long-term journey, you have 2 journeys, the inner journey and the outer journey, that you can't have when you visit 1 week London in a bus.
Sure.
So it's a completely different thing. They are both called journeys, but I would call the first one, let's say, a trip, and the other is a journey with a capital J. So there's a big difference between the two. It's a completely different type of experience.
Well, so you experience time differently when maybe doing a long-term journey than you would.
That's a very nice question, actually. Yeah, very few people ask me this. I like this question because time changes when you travel, because you experience so many things and you feel as if time expands. So let's say you travel for 12 hours around, let's say in the Deccan Plateau of India, and you see all these isolated villages and all these people, and every experience opens up new worlds, and you have to be concentrated, and you have to understand what's going on, and you learn so many things. It's as if those 12 hours have such a density of experiences that your life expands. So I experienced these 6.5 years of my travels as being of 20 years duration. So, and in a sense, I feel more old. I felt more old at the end of my journey, because these 6 years were so full of experiences that these 6 years made me feel as if 20 years have passed. So in a sense, you expand your life also. It's Einstein's theory of relativity. You live 6 years, but you actually live 20. So that's an easy way to increase the span of your life.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea. That's excellent. Well, so you talked a little bit about how the travels transformed you, and how over time you gain time, in a sense, by spending time. How did your travels change the people around you who you met, who may have never met anyone from your part of the world before?
Yes, I wasn't mindful of the fact that I was having an influence on the people I met during the first 2 years, maybe 3 years. And then one day something happened, and then I said, oh my God, I have a big influence on the people I interact with. Shall I give you a short example?
I'd love to hear that.
I was in a very remote part of the world, the Solomon Islands, and I visited some remote tribes with a guide of mine that I hired, and who spoke English and knew the language, and so he could translate. And we stayed at the small hut of an extended family. And I asked a few questions, but then I realized that the host began to ask me more questions that I asked him. And basically, his most important question, we heard an aeroplane pass by, and he pointed to the aeroplane. He said, is it true what this guy says, your guide, that there are 10 villages of my tribe in that plane? And I said immediately, I didn't think about it. Of course it's true. And then he became silent. And it was such a shock for him that I confirmed what he had heard and did not believe, that in a big bird, that you could put people in a big bird, because he had never been to a big town. He doesn't know what electricity is, nothing, a machine, engines, and so on. And he became sick, ill overnight. And in the early morning, my guide said, let's go, because they might think we brought some virus or something and might be angry and so on. And we left early, although we were very friendly, actually. And the thing is that he tried to absorb this thing, and he just thinking about it, his whole universe collapsed. And I said, oh my God, I can cause the whole universe of a human being to collapse just by a simple answer. Okay, this is the dramatic thing. Nothing of the sort happens every day. It happened only once in my journey, but that's the extreme case. And of course, I influenced probably many kids who saw me and dreamt of becoming like me one day, traveling around the world, by giving advice to people, by answering various questions about my culture and other cultures I have traveled to, by interacting with people in a most normal manner. And they studied my mannerisms. So many influences, little ripples that are still probably moving around the world. Yes, I influence people, and a long-term traveler influences people. It's a mutual thing. Yeah.
There's some responsibility then when you travel, how you behave, how you treat other people, how you interact.
Yes. Yes, I call this an ambassadorial mission responsibility. You are an ambassador both of, let's say, Europe. I'm a European, so I want to show what Europe is, the best parts of Europe. I wanted to be a good example of my culture. So yes, after 2 or 3 years, I became more mindful of that. And I wanted to represent my culture. So I was a kind of ambassador. And at the same time, after this incident that happened after 2.5 years of travel, I said, oh, you must be very responsible. You must not just say, you know, 10 tribes can fly on that plane. You have to sort of try to find a better way to do it. Mm-hmm. So you have, and you must also learn to interact with people in a way that is mutually beneficial. That's also important.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Well, that completely makes sense, and you become more than just the individual when you're traveling.
Exactly.
Yeah, it expands your world. Well, so this is wonderful. I do want to read a portion of your book, which pertains to just one section, which pertains to Gary Davis and how you came to the idea of world citizenship in your travels. And then there may be parts of your book that you may also want to read for everyone listening. So let me pull up this part of the book. You say, apart from global efforts of organizations and states, there have also been extraordinary efforts by individuals acting alone, such as Gary Davis, who created the first official world citizenship status. Davis single-handedly issued his own world passports and campaigned like a modern-day Don Quixote against the existence of national states, which he considered the greatest evil of humanity. Well, so I guess my question from that part of your book that comes to mind is, how did you come to the idea of world citizenship, and also how did you come to hear about Gary Davis?
Yes, slowly I started thinking about all these ideas, and after the second, third year of my travels, that was an important thing. I come back to the second to third year. I think it's very important. 2 years is not as important as 4 years, let's say. You move to a different level after the third year. I think you come to understand many things, to connect many things. It happened to me, actually. For another person, it might be 1 year or maybe 4 years, I don't know. But that was my personal experience. Not all world journeys are the same. Not all people think the same way. I was, in my early 40s, so a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old might experience things differently. Yeah. So I started saying, okay, wait a minute, I'm a world citizen now. I came to realize that I'm a world citizen. Who wrote about this thing? What is this world citizen? Who was the first guy who wrote about this? And then I started Googling all these things, and his name kept popping up. And I said, okay, I started reading about it. I said, wow, look at this guy. He's a Don Quixote like me. I consider myself a Don Quixote. I was traveling around the world without a name or purpose at the beginning. And I said, wow, look at this guy. He did so many things. And I was fascinated by his work. And that's how I started knowing about him and about you and your organization and everything. And it was so great. I felt like he was, we were brothers,
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess traveling, learning about other cultures, it does expand your own sort of internal universe. It helps you to understand that you're part of something bigger, you're part of humanity, and that there is this one humanity that exists.
Yes. And because people always think in terms of their nationality, and only when a big catastrophe happens, they start saying, oh, wait a minute, let's help these people with whom we were in war 5 years ago. Now there's an earthquake there, so they forget about it. But it's always there. It's the substratum of everything. Even when we think of our nationality as something special, we presuppose that we are all human beings. So it's the hidden thing behind everything. That's why we don't see it. We are as human beings different. But the fact that we are human beings, which means the same, is the substratum on which our differentiations appear. So in order to be different, we first have to be the same. And by realizing that this similarity is more important than the differences, then you come naturally to the idea that, wait a minute, when you were born as a human being, before you started learning your language, your history, obtaining all these nationalistic feelings and pride when you see your flag and so on, you were a human being. You are actually an animal. You are not even a human being when you were born, because you didn't know human language, you didn't know, you were dependent on your mother like every other animal. So we moved from an animal to a human being, and then to a Greek, an American, a Chinese, and so on. So it's the substratum of everything. So we are naturally born world citizens, as Gary Davis said. And this influenced actually that chapter of my book, which is the last chapter.
So when you traveled, in a sense that those lower level identifications, maybe it sounds like they started to fall away, because you re-expanded your universe like a child would, with the curiosity that you had.
And they seem so funny, actually. They seem so funny. They seem so funny, these lower level identifications. You know, I'm from this village in Cyprus, and you know, and we are all human beings. You go to these isolated tribes, and there is nothing in common in terms of culture and upbringing, and then in those little silences, my God, he's a human being. We are so different, but wait a minute, we are so the same. He's just hungry. The moment I was about to say I'm hungry, I'm going to eat something, at that exact moment, he says it. Wait a minute, he felt hunger at exactly the same moment as I did. And it's like we are connected through this humanity of us, and this connection is so much more important that it doesn't matter whether I speak his language or not. We are human beings. If there's a fire nearby, he will probably give his life to save me, you know, because I'm his guest. In some cultures, when you are a guest, you are like a king. I actually sent yesterday a blog. I have a blog. I send a letter every 2 weeks, and the title of my letter yesterday was VIP, and I explained how I felt like a VIP while I traveled around the world. And this is so important. You go somewhere and you were an unknown person an hour ago, and suddenly you are the king.
That's great. We should all be able to feel that way.
You are the king because you are a human being,
right?
You know?
Right.
Not because you come from another country, although that's important. You are a guest. A guest is always someone who comes from somewhere else. And this is actually very old. You see it in the Odyssey. They treated Odysseus as if he was a king, which he was actually, although they didn't know it, and so on. Yeah, I'm talking too much.
No, this is really interesting. I know Gary Davis would say that we need to move beyond our differences so that we can then protect and celebrate those differences. Does that ring a bell to you from your travels?
Yes, actually, I would like to read you something here.
Please.
The moment the idea from my book, this is from my book, the moment the idea of a nation arises, it inescapably arises in dependence upon the existence of other nations. In order, Mr. American, to feel pride in your Americanness, there has to be a Russia, there has to be a Mexico, and so on. So you need these other countries in order to feel pride. So your pride is dependent upon them. So you need them. If they vanish, you have no pride. Okay, this is the important thing. I say that national pride requires the existence of other nationalities in order to exist. If all human beings were French, the idea of being French would be meaningless. This is another example of the basic Buddhist axiom in interdependent origination. Let's not go there. And I say that just as nationalities are interdependent on one another in order to subsist, a world composed of nationalities is dependent upon the idea of a world without nationalities. So this is another idea. The moment we conceive of a world full of nationalities, at that exact moment, naturally, the opposite idea appears. Wait a minute, there's a world of nationalities. What about a world without nationalities? So a world without nationalities is as an important an idea as a world with nationality. So we don't invent something here. It's already there. The moment we have nationalities, we have a world without nationalities. This is a very fine philosophical point, and many people may miss it.
Sure.
You know?
I think one of the things that Gary Davis was doing during his life, and that what we're continuing to do to carry on his legacy here at World Service Authority, is to present the idea that we can have pride in our humanity, pride in our world citizenship status, you might say.
Exactly. I would like to say something here. A world citizen does not deny nationality, that which makes each nation different. He affirms it. It is because of the incredible variety of human civilizations and cultures that our world is so fascinating and worth exploring. The diversity of our world is its strongest, most defining characteristic. And this global diversity is only possible because of national identity. A world citizen does not deny it, he affirms it. And this is something I think that you should emphasize, because people think, oh, these guys, they talk about the human brotherhood and all these things, and it's all not true. You know, we can not all become the same, but that's not the effort here. The effort is not for all of us to become the same. The effort here is for all of us to understand that behind our differences, we are already the same.
Right, exactly. It's a question of knowing that world citizenship means that you can be a citizen of your local community, even of your family, but also have that link to the highest level. It's a question of living and loving with each other rather than fighting each other. It certainly was for Gary Davis.
Exactly. And the day will come when our era, the 21st century and the 20th century, will be considered a primitive era, because we were fighting for a piece of land or for financial things and so on. Right. And we'll be looking back to this era, and Gary Davis will not be a Don Quixote. He would be someone who was ahead of his time. That's how people think about it, I think.
Oh, definitely. Well, so I guess your viewpoint on nationalism and globalism is not really that they're mutually exclusive, but that they're maybe different levels of understanding that can work together.
They are interdependent. We need both.
Sure. That's great. Well, so I'm wondering if there's other passages from your book that you might want to read, or if there's other information you'd like to impart to everyone.
Yes, there's one that I like particularly. It's this one here from the last chapter. It says that there is no real conflict between nationalism and globalism. On the contrary, it is to the extent that a nation becomes more global in its achievements that it becomes admirable. The ancient Greek philosophers and mathematicians had fulfilled their national greatness the moment they had become universal. At that point, they ceased to belong to their nation only and ended up belonging to humanity at large. Similarly, the Islamic Golden Age, the Italian Renaissance, the French Enlightenment, the British Industrial Revolution do not belong to the nations that created them, but to all of mankind. So the natural evolution of nationalism is globalism, because the greater son of your nation you are, the greater you, the greater Indian you are, the more Gandhi you are, the more universal you are. Let's finish with Gandhi.
I like that.
Yes, I would like to congratulate you on your great work, on the great work you have been doing, and I want to believe that one day these ideas will cease to be fringe ideas and they will become mainstream. And I wish you great success in what you do, and I hope to be of some help in this endeavor of yours. And I will always be available if you need any help in terms of ideas and other more practical stuff.
Yes. I want to say thank you. So much for sharing your experiences as a world traveler and as a world citizen.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much for the honor, and I hope we talk again one day.
We will. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.